Today we're going to continue learning how to solve one-step equation. I want to remind you of the 3 rules for solving equation. Rule number 1, isolate the variable. This means you want to get the variable alone on one side of the equation. Rule number 2, use opposite operations, also known as inverse operations. We've been solving addition equations where we have to do subtraction to solve. We've also been solving subtraction equations where we have to do addition to solve. Today we're going to look at multiplication and division equations. Again, we're going to do the opposite to solve them. And rule number 3, the golden rule. Remember, always whatever you do to one side of the equation, do to the other, so you can keep a balanced equation, like a balanced scale. So let's look at an example of multiplication equation. Here you see negative 11x equals 77. Well, we know that 11 next to the x means 11 times x. Let me show you how I want you to show your work algebraically to solve a problem like this. Negative 11x equals 77. So in this case, we need to isolate x, which means we need to get rid of the negative 11. Negative 11 is being multiplied by x. So we have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. Think about how we show division in algebra. We no longer use this division symbol. We use a fraction bar. A fraction bar. You can write a slash or a fraction bar to show division. So I'm going to divide by the number with the variable. Negative 11 divided by negative 11 would give me 1. Not 0 in this case, but 1. If I have 1x, then I've isolated x. I really want x alone, and 1x is the same as x. So that cancels. Negative 11 divided by negative 11 would give me 1x. X would be alone. Remember the golden rule. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So I'm going to divide this side by negative 11 also. And x equals, you can see 77 divided by 11 is 7, but a positive divided by a negative would give me a negative. Here is my solution. X equals negative 7. Why don't you try a couple of multiplication equations? See if you can solve these by using the steps I just showed you. Make sure you show your work algebraically. I'd like you to just try number 1 and number 2 right here. Pause the video and then we'll check your work. Okay, let's take a look now at your solutions to number 1 and 2. So number 1, we have 3x equals negative 18. In this example, hopefully you remember to divide both sides by the number with the variable. So that's the 3. I divide this side by 3 also, I find that x equals negative 6. You can circle your solution. These are pretty easy one-step equations. And I know that many of you might be thinking, I can solve this in my head. I know what x equals. Remember, our objective is to learn how to solve equations algebraically. So I need you to learn how to show your work so that when the equations get harder and harder and harder, that you'll have some steps that you can take. You'll know how to show your work algebraically. And you'll understand what you're actually doing in the process. Okay, let's check number 2. In number 2, we had 2x equals negative 6. Okay, again, we have multiplication, so we're going to undo it by dividing. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 2. So that cancels. 2 divided by 2 is 1x. X is now alone. Divide the other side by 2, and that gives me negative 3. How'd you do on those 2? You can try these others if you want to. We're going to do them in class tomorrow. Let's take a look at another example. In this example, we see division. The fraction bar means divide. So this equation means x divided by negative 4 equals negative 12. So something divided by negative 4 equals negative 12. Again, I know you probably already know the answer. but I want to show you how to solve it algebraically so that we can do the harder ones when it comes time for that. So, write down the equation. Again, I'm going to try to isolate x, which means I have to get rid of the negative 4. To get rid of the negative 4, the number with the variable, I have to use opposite operations. The opposite of division is multiplication. How do we show multiplication in algebra? We usually just put the number right next to a variable. Remember, we no longer use this for multiplication. That's a variable. That's x. You could use a dot, but sometimes a dot can be confused with a decimal. So what I prefer is parentheses. I'm going to show multiplying by negative 4 in parentheses. Since the opposite of dividing is multiplying, if I multiply this whole thing by negative 4, they will cancel out. Negative 4 over negative 4 will give me 1, and x will be alone again. 1x is the same as x. Whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I'm going to multiply this side by negative 4 also. See how I'm showing my work? Make sure you can rewind the video, watch it again if I'm going too quickly. X now equals negative times a negative is a positive 48. There's your solution. Rewind that if I went too quickly. Watch the steps. Listen to me say all those steps again. Why don't you try 2 problems again? This time, why don't you try number 4 and number 5? Try number 4 and number 5 down here, this written in one. Pause the video, unpause when you're finished, and we'll go over them. Okay, let's take a look at how you did. Number 4, x over 4 equals negative 8. All right, so I'm going to do the opposite of division, and I'm going to multiply both sides by the number with the variable, which in this case is 4. So that cancels, and x equals negative 32. How'd you do on that one? All right, let's take a look at this last one. This is a little tricky because in this one, 7 equals x over negative 9. The variable's on the right-hand side. Did you notice that? Always think I need to move the number with the variable so that the variable will be alone. So the number I need to move is negative 9. It's being divided by negative 9, so I'm going to do the opposite and multiply both sides by negative 9. That will cancel out the negative 9 with the x. X will be alone, and 7 times negative 9 is negative 63. Maybe you didn't get that right at first, but with some more practice, you can do these. We'll practice again tomorrow. Make sure you bring all your notes, and I'll see you then.